Hi, welcome to the sixth episode of What's Ahead for Framingham. I'm your host, Geoff Epstein, and we're recording this at Access Framingham Studios with the help of the staff here who do a great job of spreading information so the community can know what's going on. And that's the point of this program, to know what's going on in city government and how that relates to the election ahead so people can make good decisions, and that means you. So today's episode is going to be focused on one particular thing, and that is the community centre. This was a very strange project because it popped out of nowhere. The mayor just produced this more than a year ago. It was like at the start of 24. I think I wrote an article on it in the Framingham Observer, which if you Google that, it's a Substack newsletter, and the article title was How the Framingham Community Centre Project Ran Aground, which is a fairly grim appraisal, but it's pretty truthful. The major thing here is that when we got COVID relief from the federal government, it was designed to help out communities and allow them to invest in things that would hopefully be somewhat related to COVID. For example, in the school system, a lot of what was done with COVID money was upgrading the air handling systems in the schools so they'd have better filters and so on. And that's a really good thing because if you've got COVID in the air in the city, the school filtration system is working, it can take that virus out. So filtration systems are really good. That was a good use of the money. And it was used for other specifically school-related things. Other communities put money into things that would benefit the community segments that were very badly hit by COVID. For example, low-income families had a tough time because they lost their jobs. They were living in smaller accommodations where they couldn't distance themselves from each other. They probably had one bathroom. People living in larger multi-bedroom places could do a better job of that. So they lost their jobs. They had bad healthcare outcomes because we all went when we could to go and get vaccinated at the Patriot Stadium in Foxborough. But how can you do that if you don't have a car to get there? So there were health issues, financial issues, and that was a really difficult time. Also, the students who belonged to low-income families when they went remote had a tough time because their internet connection was not necessarily all that great, even though the school system tried to use hotspots and other technology to improve it. But if you have a culture in elementary school children, for example, in the family where they don't have a laptop or some kind of computer around to connect to classes, then it's tough. So that's very much more difficult than families who are better off, who all have computer systems and internet access and so on. So that money went to the schools. But then on the city side, what happened? The city side had a whole lot of money left over after they've done. I still haven't seen the plan that they did. I think in the schools they did a much better job of saying where the money was spent. But at the end of the day, there was $15 million left over that came under the control of the mayor. And I have a little bit of deja vu with this as to how it's all turned out with the community centre. It's like a smaller scale version of what happened in Newton when I was there, where the mayor somehow got control of money coming back from Mass State building projects. You do these building projects like we did Fuller, and then you get reimbursed for them by the state. And there were a bunch of them in Newton, and the reimbursements came back, which could have been put towards debt service, but the mayor in Newton managed to accumulate them, $25 million of it, into a fund called the Stabilization Fund. And with that money and with a compliant city council, he managed to start off a high school project, which initially was set to cost $86 million with a $46 million state reimbursement. And in those days, the rules were pretty loosey-goosey for doing that. And it got out of control. Long story short, the project cost $200 million rather than 86, and the reimbursement stayed at 46. So that project actually caused a revolution in Newton, which occurred when I was there, and they went from celebrating their excellence all the time to actually constant improvement. But the bottom line is the mayor had a lot of money, got this project off with no community buy-in, and then it ran off the rails and became very expensive. And a lesson was learnt from that, and there was a lot of political change in Newton because of it. Now we have a situation here where the mayor suddenly has $15 million. Well, it's a very bad thing to give a mayor total control of $15 million with no oversight from the city council. I think the city council, is possibly, well, certainly not as functional as it could be because it hasn't done much of a good job of financial oversight anyway. The budget process is pretty terrible and so on, but that's what I hope to improve when I get elected mayor, if that happens. But you've got this mayor, and then suddenly he decides what he's going to do with it. What's he going to do with it? Well, he suddenly decided he was going to do a community centre, whatever that meant, and it's like there was no general discussion or input from people saying, hey, what should we spend this money on? Should we spend it on expanding the senior centre, or should we expand it on maybe improving services or something on the south side? Maybe we could do what some communities did. Some communities took $1 million of COVID money and planted trees in their low-income areas, increasing the tree canopy and lowering the temperature in summer. The south side's 10 degrees hotter than the north side in Framingham because it has very little heat canopy, solar canopy, and it has a lot of heat islands. So we could have taken $1 million and started planting trees on the south side and actually helped the people who were impacted by COVID, but no. We had this community centre project pop out. Now, to the mayor's credit, he did then put together a group, an advisory group for the community centre once he decided that's what it was, and they were supposed to work and figure out what it would be. It's not a bad idea. Other communities around us have community centres, and they serve various purposes. They provide support for adults, adult education, adult classes. Some of them have pre-K is what they supply. So it's not a terrible idea, and we could have gone and looked at other communities to see what they did. And so this 25-member advisory panel was put together by the mayor in January of 2024. It's, heading towards almost 2 years ago. And there's a problem right at the start. If you put together a panel of 25 people, getting them all in the room at the same time is very difficult. If you want an advisory group that's manageable, probably if you have 6 or 8 or something, it would work. But therein lies the initial problem. We had that group of 25, very cumbersome. It was kind of managed by Mike Dicino, the chief operating officer, with Susan Petroni, as the second in command, and they were supposed to run this thing. And the thing is, what happened? In January, what did they meet? I've got here in this article, the appendix says how many meetings there were in 2024. There were 4 meetings in 2024. 2 of them had minutes, 2 have no minutes, so we have no idea what happened. And so it met infrequently. During that period, they were supposed to visit community centres to see what they were doing, which is an obvious thing, okay? Well, one person out of the 25 member advisory committee actually visited one community centre once. So in this entire time where there was plenty of opportunity to actually find out why these other community centres existed and what they did and how they served people, no information was gained. And so that is the second failure. It's too big of a working group, and then no one seemed to be particularly interested in doing anything. And so the way it was run, if you're managing that group like Mike Dicino did, then one of the preconditions of belonging to the group should be that you should be engaged and turn up and also go and find out information. You could put together a subcommittee and then they could go and find out information. Personally, I think it's a very interesting thing what happens in community centres. But it failed. Too big, didn't meet, no one really got any information. So there they were after a year, you know, of these meetings, and coming into 2025 this year, you know, there were a few more meetings and there have been a few, but then out popped the idea, well, we didn't go and see any community centres anywhere else, so they lost that. The second idea they came up with, would they have a survey? So the first thing when you're out of ideas and you didn't do your homework and you didn't do the job you were supposed to be doing is just put the burden on the community. Well, let's ask the community what they think. Now, the community will give you good feedback. So they ran a survey, and normally you run a survey and it closes in a couple of months and then you get the results, tabulate them, publish them. But they started this survey and then they kept it open till September, and it closed in September, and we haven't heard anything since, at least I haven't. I thought they'd close the survey and then in September we'd have a big fanfare about how great the community centre was and how the good feedback was that came in, and it would be kind of like an electoral, you know, campaign help to the mayor as to how the community centre was such a big thing and how it was going to promise a lot of things for people in Framingham. But that hasn't happened yet. He still might do it in October, but I had expected that. The other thing was the way the survey was conducted. It's not clear how many people it reached. But I've been in the survey business. I was in it with other folks in Framingham when I first came here in 2014. A year later, I served on the task force for communications in the Framingham Public Schools. And we had 4 or 5 people in that good-sized number of people. And we did a survey trying to find out what people wanted in terms of communications, because that made sense, because the parents in the city wanted to communicate with the school, so they had a lot of actionable information about communicating with the schools. Most people don't know anything about community centres, but we did that, and then one of the things that I pushed was a survey out to those parents to find out what they wanted. And when you do a survey, you've got questions you might ask, like, do you have children in the schools, and, you know, or not, and have you had problems with communicating and with which part of the school system and so on. But one of the incredibly valuable things you can do is a free-form input area. And we had a very large one, so you could put 1,000 words in there. And I was the one who analysed the responses. We had 1,000 responses to this survey, and at least 500 of them had very detailed responses in that free-form part. I went through, classified all of them, and was able to distill out of it, with a couple of weeks of work, what major recommendations we could make to the school system based on that. One was improve the website. The other was to make sure that news would come rapidly from Framingham Public Schools and not hit the patch and the Framingham source first, so that people, even teachers, would find out decisions from the school system from the local news media rather than the superintendent at the time. This was before Bob Tremblay got here. So that survey that was done for the community centre didn't have a nice big free-form format, so it missed out on a big opportunity to get really good input. So there we are. You've got this oversized working group, didn't meet very much, half the minutes are missing. Then after a year they sent out a survey. The survey is supposed to drop now. Now we're 18 months into the process, so when you look at this from a city management point of view, you've got to ask about the chief operating officer who managed this thing. How come he didn't do a better job of that? And there was an interesting thing right at the start when it was advertised with a press release. The press release was given in the context of the mayor having bought the old Marion High School. The idea was to say, like, here we are. In September, the city of Framingham, this is back at the start of the process, before January 2024, it was going to use federal ARPA funds to, that's the COVID funds, to purchase the former Marion High School property and its contents for $3.35 million from Invictus Forever Inc., which was an educational outfit. The former high school has a 750-seat theatre, a gym, a cafeteria, multiple, really great property. And generally, the Catholic Church maintains its properties pretty well, so it was probably in decent condition. And then the City of Framingham is planning to redevelop the property for theatre, art, sports, and other intergenerational activities. And then it says the advisory committee will report to the mayor, who will provide goals and assignments to the committee. Well, in the entire time, there were never any goals and assignments provided to the committee. So from the mayor point of view, the mayor dropped the ball on providing them guidance. I mean, he should have been there at each meeting trying to make sure that they were properly tasked. And if he didn't do it, the chief operating officer should have done it. But it was just a terrible management failure at the highest levels of the city government, and not just the mayor, but also the chief operating officer. So that was a bit of a problem. So then what happened, where are we now? We've got all of this process that went on. It's almost 2 years in. And one of the key things with that COVID money is it had to be encumbered by the end of 24. This whole process started after they bought the Marion High School, and the process started in January 2024. So they had the entire year to figure out what to do. They hired an architect for over $2 million, and there were no plans, nothing happened. And so they did the minimum they could do to make sure that money was going to be spent, because if they'd spent $3 million of the 15, so there's $12 million left and they had to spend it somewhere. And there was no plan, design or anything like that. So they rapidly did what you could do with the building, and that is they got rid of the asbestos. That's essential, you can do it. They replaced the windows, which were all old, and they're going to do the roof. And so they did things that would bring that building back. There's HVAC and other kinds of things which weren't done yet. But they spent the $12 million, or encumbered it, to try and bring this building into good shape. That's not a bad thing to do, but we don't know what's going to happen to it. So my position, if I make it to mayor, is what to do with this building. Well, the building could serve some pretty straightforward purposes. It is capacity. It was a school. It has a gym and a cafeteria. And if you look, there are 2 programs in the school system which could benefit from this, and they could occupy it and use it during the daytime, and adults could use it in the evenings and the weekends. So pre-K capacity is something that we had trouble with. We actually had money from the state to fund the staff, but where was the capacity going to come from? There was an opportunity to do it at Farley, but the mayor wasn't interested in fixing Farley, putting sprinklers in, anything like that. He wanted something separate that's more associated with him rather than with the school department. And so he put his money into this building. But the pre-K program could easily go, at least some of it, into the Marion High School. Similarly, there's the Thayer program, which is a school program associated with the high school, which a lot of schools like Newton, Brookline have this for students who don't fit into the normal standard student model of turning up to classes on a schedule, but it's more for students who don't fit in very well. These programs are like a school within a school for those particular programs. They're very successful in keeping those kids on track in a different kind of environment. We currently have a building right near Butterworth Park for this Thayer program. They called it the Thayer program, where there are 50 students accommodated. We would like to expand that probably to 100 to 200 students, which would also relieve the capacity problem at the high school. So again, the Marion High School could be used for some of those students. Plus it has a gym and a cafeteria, which that Thayer building does not have any recreational place for the Thayer kids who are in the high school to do anything. So there's some really good possibilities there. So if I am elected mayor, we'll kind of do another kind of round of community input, but we'll get input from the school system, also from the senior center. The Callahan Center is getting pretty jam-packed, and there's an increasing senior population, so we could start doing programs at the community center. But the point is, in all of this, my point here, in a nutshell, is money was spent, no plans were done, there was no management of this project which has any sign or semblance of professional approach to a project like this. We just spent $15 million of our community money on something which has no plan and has no buy-in. So I'm going to end pretty close to there. It's another situation where a project just ran wild. The city council didn't have a role because they didn't have oversight of that money, and it's been spent, and it looks like there's another $15 or $20 million needed to upgrade the HVAC, put in ADA compliance elevators and things like that. Just a real wreck. It's like the MBTA Communities Act planning process, which ran off the rails and didn't produce anything. There's a management failure here that's quite a repeated situation in the city government. So there it is, $15 million of federal money spent rehabbing a building, which is okay, we'll recover from that. Another 15 to 20 million needed to complete the project, and the community is going to be on the hook for that. So no community input, no council input, no nothing. So that community center project is one big mess, and it can be retrieved, but there's still no planning for it at all. So if you elect me as mayor, I will promise to do the best I can to bring that project into real use, most likely with senior and pre-K components, but additionally to try and serve the population in a manner that would make sense. And one of the first things I would do is start visiting community centers that are within 10 or 15 miles of here to find out what would work. But again, that's planning, that's sound practice, that's being financially, responsible. And this was very financially irresponsible. It was poor planning, and that's the story on the community center. We'll see if anything comes out of the mayor's office in the next month to make us think that it's going to be anything other than the mismanagement, poster child for mismanagement that it is. So that's the end of episode 6, and I'll cook up something for the next episode. There's lots of things going on as we come into the last month before the election. Again, if you want change in Framingham, donate to the campaign. We still need 5 to 10 grand. Donations are coming in quite well. And the other thing that we need is yard signs. If you really support us, then just go to the website and request a yard sign. You just do a click and put your name, contact information and address in, and we'll drop you off a yard sign. And there's other ways to volunteer to help us bring change to the city. So this program is, it's innovative, mildly innovative. It's just a candidate telling you as much as possible about what's going on in the city. And I like solving problems. I'm enjoying this. I've had just a wonderful experience running. I hope that I can continue that as mayor. And certainly if I do, we'll see a lot of different things happen around here and a lot more communications. And this program will continue as the mayor's edition of What's Ahead for Framingham. Again, thanks for watching, and I'm signing off. This is Geoff Epstein, your host. Good night.